Now he's up there. We're gonna keep it shorter today. Today is Vayikra. It talks about the korbanot, which is the offerings. It's interesting this week. I've been trying to understand the taming of the bull. The bull is representative of, I see myself as a bull. I think that's probably why I'm trying to figure out how to tame myself. It's the animal inclination, the animal instinct, the animal soul of man. That's what the bull is representative of. It's who you are, constantly fighting. It's the constant tearing away of the flesh and the spirit. It's the constant reconciliation of your faith with God and man, and constantly seeking to become deeper and deeper with God and bring him from heaven to earth. There was a rabbi that I was listening to that talked about how there's this concept in Judaism of the animal soul, which is really your innate soul. It's who you are, right? It's your flesh. And they're talking about our purpose in life, to get a good job, to have good relationships, all those things that are important, they're used to bless God. How you use them to bless God is that constant struggle and that constant fight, identifying God in everything that we do. And today, the interesting part about today is we're having a bar and bat mitzvah, which is really the concept of taming of the bull. Okay, you have this korbanot, the offering that comes before God, and when you make an offering or a sacrifice to God, you've made yourself an ensign to the world that I will represent the one true God forever. This bar bat mitzvah is one of those events. You're saying forever from now on, I will represent myself as a believer, a follower of the Mashiach, a follower of God, and I will continually seek to tame the animal soul inside of me to serve God on this earth and bring him from heaven and make a holy abode for him here, so that others may find him and others may see him. So it's an interesting, if I look back on 8 years ago, literally 8 years ago today, we had a bar mitzvah for 9 people. 8 years ago today, 9 people were bar mitzvahed up here on this stage with this parasha, Vayikra. And it was the same idea. And those people that were bar mitzvahed were not 13, were not 12, as is customary. They were adults because they did not have the opportunity to have a bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah when they were young. And so they wanted to make that stand. And it's a custom, it's a tradition. It is a modern tradition, to be frank. It's not something that is necessarily ancient, but it's a modern tradition. And we'll talk through it a little bit. But it's a modern tradition so that you keep people on track, understanding what our purpose is in the ways of God and following the mitzvot of God, the commandments of God. But in Hebrew, the bar mitzvah, for those of you who do not know, literally means son of the commandment. Bat mitzvah is literally daughter of the commandments. Okay, the term represents a religious and a legal obligation that a young woman or young man turning the age of at least 12 or 13, 12 for a young lady and 13 for a young man, must commit themselves to God, keeping the laws of Moshe that were presented to him at Har Sinai. The formal ceremony for a bar bat mitzvah, it ranges and it varies, from place to place, from congregation to congregation. depending upon what Jewish community you're a part of, there could be the very large, elaborate events that take place, or ours, which is more smaller. What we're doing is it's literally more of a rite of passage. You come up, you share from the Torah, you read from the Torah, then you make a statement about your faith. But it's a modern practice that's been adopted by Jewish sects in order to mark the day of transition from boyhood or childhood, I'll say, to becoming a man or a woman. Upon reaching the age of accountability, the young man or woman is obliged to keep and fulfill all the commands that pertain to his status in society. That rite of passage, that change, that transformation in your own mind should cause you to pause for the rest of your life. Pause and think about what you do before you do it. Those people that have never gone through a rite of passage, that have never gone through a bar bat mitzvah, that have never made the outward profession of faith, the outward profession of I am a son or a daughter of the commandments of God, those people that have never done that, they don't look back on their life and say, well, wait, I told the world, and more importantly, I told the community that I will be a son or a daughter of the commandments, and if I do these things, I will not be complying with my obligation that I chose. I chose. It's not an obligation that you have to do, you choose to do it. And the choice is no different from the choice that all men faced, the choice that Adam faced in the garden before he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the choice that he had to make. Will I be a son of the command? There was only a singular command. Adam had one singular command to follow. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he had the choice to make, and he said, am I a son of the commandments or am I a son of myself? And he made the decision to be a son of himself, but that, obviously put us here. We're sitting here in clothing. It's terrible. He had this opportunity to be a son of the commandment. He chose not to be, but he was obliged to. He didn't pause. He didn't think. So now when you become a son or a daughter of the commandments, you take pause. You say, okay, I've told the world that I'm obliged to keep the commands of God. And that's a direct, you're staring directly in the face of our Christian brothers and sisters, to be honest, as a Messianic Jew, because our Christian brothers and sisters say very blatantly, and sometimes vehemently, that we do not follow the commands of God. That those are the laws of the old days, right? We don't want to keep those. They're not our responsibility anymore. We don't have to do that. We've been forgiven. Yes, we have been forgiven. That's not, we will always be forgiven. We were forgiven prior to the giving of the law. God is a forgiving God. That's the beauty of who God is. He is a forgiving God. However, we have to make a stand, and we have to make a choice. Do I want to follow God, or do I want to follow myself, my flesh? I was at dinner the other night, and I was sitting there at the table, and there was a couple of people next to me talking about work and their jobs, and the drama that was in the conversation was making me want to move my seat. But they began to talk about, the one began to talk about how God and meditating on God and reading the scriptures is what's getting her through, the days. And I thought, well, that's good. I mean, well, now this is turning out to be something, right? And then the other one said, absolutely, and they're talking, and they're going back and forth reading scripture, and they're sharing scripture back and forth, which I thought was really great. And I'm like, well, at least, they're kind of, mentoring each other. And then the one who seemed to be the boss at work, the one that was like the leader. And you could tell they were the boss by how they were talking. The one goes, here, well, let me show you this. This is also what I do. You have to combine it with this. If you don't combine it with this, then you're gonna, then you don't get complete serenity in your mind. And she brought up this path to meditation and basically this Taoist Buddhist approach. And now I'm thinking to myself, what planet is this person on? Like, she just spent time talking about the actual Bible, the scriptures, and how God has given her this great place. And then she's like, oh, and by the way, you need to do this too. Like, the merger of the holy and the profane in this life it's extraordinary. And trying to separate that out is difficult. Now, clearly, this woman is not a bat mitzvah. She's not a daughter of the commandments, okay? And clearly, if you are a bat mitzvah, if you are a bar mitzvah, you take pause at something like that because it's no different from building a calf of gold and to begin to worship it. It's the same thing. It's merging the religions and the faiths of the world into your religion and into your faith. It's no different. It's the same thing. So meditation and finding a focal point and following the path and looking for the light and the whole thing that they do, and think deeply and breathe and just allow emptiness to come. Like, what planet are we on? There is no emptiness. There's only the presence of God. Where the presence of God is cannot be empty because it fills you. You empty yourself out, you become a vessel that's empty, ready for lots of other crap to come inside of you, okay? So, I'm a little teapot, Don't tip me over and pour me out. Fill me up with the presence of God. How do you do that? You study and meditate on the presence of God. A daughter of the commandments, a bat mitzvah, a bar mitzvah, they look to themselves and they say, I need to fill myself with the commands of God because I am a bar mitzvah. I am a bat mitzvah. The world sees me as one. So I need to do that. Now, every single day, it's a struggle for a bar and a bat mitzvah. It's no different for anyone else. Just because you are a bat or a bar mitzvah doesn't make it any easier for you. The conversation that they were having, I wanted to say something because that's who I am. I held my tongue, which was odd, but I did. I held my tongue. But based on the conversation, I wanted to look at them and go, what in the world, where in the world have you learned that it's supposed to be easy? It's not easy. In fact, we were told that it will be difficult. That's the idea of the sweat of your brow. The pang of child labor. Those two things were specifically pointed out as problematic for Adam and Eve. But you can extrapolate from those two effects that a lot of other stuff will be difficult as well. It's not going to be easy. I have to work and till the ground, and I have to sweat to get anything I get. Everything's going to be difficult. From that day forward, Adam was, this is ridiculous. Look what I have to do. Think about it. He's back there with a hoe or whatever he's got to do to make the ground work, to till the ground. And he's, every time he's going, I cannot believe she gave me that fruit. That's the rest of your life. Welcome to the rest of your life. You're never going to be happy with that. Where you have to get, and this is the taming of the bull, because that's the bull. And it's interesting, we have to put a bull on an altar. The korbanot, the offering, is a bull. It's interesting, we have to put the animal soul on the altar and sacrifice it. We literally have to place ourselves, who we are, on the altar and kill it and become servants. Nothing more than servants, not kings, not queens, not princesses, not princes, not Zaphanath Paneah, not anyone that you think was great in the world. Not any of them. Servants. The day that we become servants, the day that we realize our animal soul is to suffer and surrender to our lives God, peace abounds. You're at complete peace. If you think about it, if you expect nothing and you don't have expectations for yourself, but all you want to do is pour out for others, you're at complete peace because there's nothing you're left wanting. God desires for us to be His servants, so therefore we say, Lord, I will. Wherever you call me, wherever you bid me, whatever you tell me to do. This is the beauty of Moshe. Moshe, Hineni, Adonai, Hineni. Here am I am your servant. I am free to do your bidding. I am here to do what you will. That guy was probably a mess with these people, right? 3 million people coming out of Egypt. I mean, leading a $3 million person, troop. That's not an easy task to do. Even his father-in-law said, "You're crazy. You think you can do this by yourself? You better get some elders." Right? This is a nutty thing to do. But he said to God, "Here am I, Hineni, I will be your servant, and I will do whatever you bid me to do." He was the servant of God. He went where God told him to go. Imagine the peace of mind that you have when you say to yourself, "Well, I'm doing what God calls me to do. I'm going where God called me to go. I don't know what to tell you." The peace of mind you have is an enormous, it's beautiful. Now, a guy like me who's driven, all right, who's focused, who's goal-oriented, I set my sights on something and I go after it. If it doesn't happen, what happens? I get upset. I get irritable. Why did that not work? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I in this situation? Well, that was my goal. When you don't have your own wanting, and you just say, "God, if this is what you've called me to be, then I will be it." You have peace of mind. You have total peace of mind. As a bar and bat mitzvah, that's really what we do. We serve the commandments of God. Therefore, we have to look to those commandments and say, am I living within the context of the ways of God? Am I doing the things that God has called me to do? Am I treating others the way God would require me to treat them? Am I living my life as a sign to the world that I follow the God of Israel? Do they know that I'm following the God of Israel? Right? And if they know, do they question? Do they want to know more about it? Do I stand as a good representation for who He is? All those things are important to ask yourself. A bar and a bat mitzvah will take pause and ask themselves that question. You know, many people in the world, I mean, if you have a certain position in life, whether it's at work or wherever, you'll ask yourself, you know, people will say, "Well, you can't do that because you're this person. You know, you're the boss. You can't act like that. You can't talk that way. You can't say those things. You know, you're a preacher or teacher or rabbi, you can't act that way. All those things, people will look at you and say you can't do it. Well, that's what it's no different being a bar and bat mitzvah. So all of you that have become a bar and bat mitzvah, you can't act that way. You can't do those things. You're a daughter and a son of the commandments. You're a follower of the Most High God. In one commentary, it reports that while the occasion of becoming a bar mitzvah was formalized in later times, it's obvious from various sources that the status or the obligation for a boy at the age of 13 was assumed in early times. According to Eleazar Simeon of the 2nd century, a father was responsible for the deeds of his son until age 13. Typically, it was at this age that a young man could be recognized as a member of a minyan. A minyan is 10 men, okay, that would come together to worship God. They could become members of a Beit Din, which is like a court or a ruling authority, and they could buy and sell property. A 13-year-old could buy and sell property, but they weren't allowed to drink and they weren't allowed to drive yet. The Talmud gives us a historical picture into the 1st century during the 2nd period, providing us with the insight as to what was common practice around this rite of passage. There's no evidence of a formal process or a ceremony that took place as we see today. However, the Talmud records that in Yerushalayim, during this period, it's customary for the sages to bless a child who succeeded in completing his first fast day at 12 or 13. The fact that a child would be responsible to fast suggests that they had come under the commandments of the Torah and they're required to follow them going forward in their life's pursuit. And I want to read a passage from the book of Luke to kind of bring this into perspective for us. We'll bring the Brit Hadashah into this, help us understand, is this something that we should do, right, as Messianic Jewish believers? Is this a custom of just the traditional Jews becoming the followers of commands? Well, I think it's a custom that all of us should really embrace because it really helps us to understand our path. It starts us off early. You know, when we have the mind to think, you heard the speeches today, you know, the way a young person processes, you know, what they're going through and their experience. You know, I think that when I was younger, I used to process better than I do now. The older I get, the more jaded I get. I don't process as well, right? So it's important at that age to really understand what I'm doing, who I am, and where I'm headed so that I can get the foundation correct. But let's look at the experience of our Mashiach. Let's look at Yeshua's experience as he came into age in the flesh. In Luke chapter 2 it says, "And when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own city Nazareth. And the child grew and was waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover, which we are upon. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast." So he's coming up to Passover at 12 years old, and the Talmud suggests that at 12 or 13 that this experience would happen, this transition. "And when they had fulfilled the days and they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem. And Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinfolk and acquaintances." Now, I don't know anyone in the world that would leave and just say, "Oh, Jesus is around. Yeah, he's somewhere with us." You're on your way back to Nazareth from Jerusalem, which is a trek. I mean, that's not an easy trip. I mean, that's a trek. I mean, it takes a good minute. By car, for sure. I mean, imagine doing it by foot, right? So they were already on a day's journey. They're like, well, Jesus is somewhere, you know. So there must have been a big group of them that was traveling together. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, yeah, we read that. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem seeking him. So imagine they're really upset. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple. So he's been 3 days away from his parents. And they show up, it's Passover time. And in 3 days, he's in the temple. Sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. So he's listening to them and he's questioning them. And all that heard him were astonished and at his understanding and answers. Imagine, he's 12 years old. He's speaking like a rabbi, giving knowledge and understanding of the Torah to these doctors. And they're astonished. And when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said, Son, why hast thou dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sorrowing. Like, you've really made us upset. You've really scared us. What's the matter with you? She's probably yelling at him. I mean, this makes it sound really nice. You know, why hast thou dealt with us, son? You know, no, that was not how it went. She probably scooped him up, said, what in the world is wrong with you, kid? He said to them, how is it that you sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my father's business? So this 12-year-old kid said, what are you looking for me for? You don't need to worry about me. I'm doing my father's business. And they understood not the saying which he spoke to them. They didn't even get it. These are his parents, by the way, that remember just 12 years earlier, she conceived as a virgin. Okay? And he had to be talked to by an angel in order to believe that she was not a whoring about. So now this 12-year-old kid looks at them and says, who are you to look for me? I'm about my father's business. And they didn't understand. You would think that from day one, you would be thinking to yourself, man, this is a miracle child. Something's crazy gonna, if he's gone for 3 days, he's sitting in the temple giving answers to rabbis. That makes total sense because he's the child of God. He's in the temple. No, she came to him, she saw him giving answers in the temple, ran over to him, scooped him up and said, what is your problem? And probably gave him a spank. He's like, I'm the child of God. Now, I'm trying to take an ancient text and bring it into modern society, right? I'm trying to take this ancient text and understand the actual circumstances that probably went on. And I know as a parent, and you know as a parent, that those types of things, they just don't happen. Your 12-year-old kid doesn't leave for 3 days. But here he is, he says, you know, I'm about my father's business, and then they understood not what he was saying, which is mind-blowing to me, that they wouldn't have understood because literally it's just 12 years ago, God literally said, I'm giving you my child. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them. But his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. So now he, Jesus, listened to his parents and he submitted himself to his parents. It says that he was subject to them. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. God on earth telling this woman and this man, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. subject to them, but his mother kept his sayings. She knew that there was something to it. And then Jesus did what? He increased in wisdom, he increased in stature, and he increased in the favor with God and man. So we see this 12-year-old, in accordance with the custom for Pesach, goes to Jerusalem with his parents and slipped away from them for 3 days, was found among the learned, educated men of the temple courts, the Beit Din, providing insight and understanding into scriptures and their application for society. And we have to point out here that Yeshua was welcomed in the temple by the doctors. He was provided the opportunity to bring insight. So we have to assume that those present were in some way including Yeshua among the men at this point in time. He was one of the men. It was not, he could have become a part of the Beit Din because he was of age. This point of what was going on at that time supports the Talmudic claim that the first century used either the age 12 or 13 to mark the age of responsibility. In addition to this proof, I find it interesting that Yeshua made a point to tell his earthly parents, as we've already discussed, that he's about his Father's business, suggesting that he come out from under their authority, from out under their earthly parents, and under the commands and the authority of God the Father, transitioning to what is known as a bar mitzvah. He's come out from under the authority of his parents, and now he's under the authority of God as a bar mitzvah. And I remember at that age for myself, the transition to understanding the scriptures for myself. Me beginning to read and interpret without just hearing what my parents told me it meant. It now was me reading and me interpreting what I was reading and understanding it from my vantage, from what God has put inside of me. I remember that feeling. I remember that transition. Well, this is what it means, or this is what it says. Well, how do we know it means that? As a bar and bat mitzvah, you can make those questions. You can ponder. You can think through it. And you can try to understand. You can dig through to the truth. You can ask questions that you may have been confused about. But we conclude that this was the time that Yeshua was in transition from boyhood to the ultimate role as the Mashiach for both Israel and the world. Today we honor Elijah and Naomi for their obedience and their commitment to the God of Israel and to his Torah. And as a congregation, we affirm that these two have come before us and their families to declare their affinity, their love for the commands of Avinu Hashem, our Father. And this Shabbat, it's a very special Shabbat because we've been given the opportunity to witness these two following in the traditions of our elders, following in the tradition of Yeshua, we can claim, staking their claim in the house of Israel through this rite of passage. And you, as you have realized, this bar bat mitzvah is highly unique because how old is Naomi? Huh? Naomi's 13, so she's a year beyond. And you're 16, right? And Elijah's 15. So it's unique because it's not the actual age that you should take a bar or bat mitzvah. But they've had more time to think. They've had more time to age. They've had more time to actually develop and make the decision on their own to do this. And this was their decision. This was not the decision of their mother or their father. This was their decision to do that, to become the bar and the bat mitzvah. And when we look up to them and we see them up here doing this, we should say to ourselves, look at the commitment that that young person is making to God. I too want to make that commitment. I too want to recommit myself to the ways of Israel and to the kingdom of God. I want to take my animal soul, my bull, and I want to lay it on the altar as korbanot, as we see in Vayikra this Shabbat. And I want to sacrifice it to God to serve Him in the capacity that He has called me to serve Him, not in the capacity that I want to serve Him. Not with what I want to do, but what He's called me to do. There's two different things. Many of us want to do things. Lord, I want to do this for you, and I want to do that. But that doesn't mean He's called you to that. A servant doesn't get to choose what he does. A servant is told what he does. That's the purpose of a bar bat mitzvah. Not to learn that you become a man and you can make your own choices, but to learn that you've become a servant to follow the commandments of God. So each of us need to reflect on that today in Vayikra. And He called each and every one of you to be a servant. Amen. It is our duty to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the author of creation. For He made us unlike the nation of the lands, and has not placed us like the families of the earth. He has not made our portion like theirs, and our lot like all their multitudes. We bend the knee and bow and acknowledge our thanks before the King over kings, the Holy One. Blessed is He. He stretches out heaven and establishes earth's foundation. The seat of His glory is in the heavens above, and the presence of His power is in the most exalted heights. He's our God, there's none other. True is our King, there's nothing beside Him, as it is written in His Torah. You shall know this day and take to your heart that the Lord, He is God in the heavens above, and on the earth below there is none other.